Okay, so this is a simple, proven method to both get stronger and to build mass. This method is pretty classic. However, I think it's underutilized by enough trainees that want a balance between maximal neural drive and strength to produce force and also muscle size in order to facilitate enhanced gains in that regard. It's going to be using RPE, ramping sets, and back off sets, and we're going to go over how to use those right now. So RPE, just as a quick primer for everyone, it stands for rate of perceived exertion, and it's a scale of 1 through 10. Typically, when you rate a scale difficulty of 1 through 5, it's a warm-up weight. You're moving the weight very fast. 6 to 7 is a moderate effort. You have several reps with good form left. And an 8 out of 10 is a pretty high effort. It's a hard set, near failure, but you still are able to perform some quality reps afterwards. Usually powerlifters like to say 2. However, I like to be more flexible with that and just say very high effort, close to failure, but not quite there. 9 is just about at failure. It's at failure without compromising form. You possibly could add a couple pounds to the bar, but probably not more reps. And then 10 is an absolute all-out effort. You're pretty much at failure. You couldn't add weight or reps. That's how I use RPE, generally speaking. So what you're going to do to start this method is you're going to begin with ramping to a heavy set. You'd begin with light weights, which would be an RPE 1 to 5, and then you would add 15 to 50 pounds each set on the barbell. This is usually done with large compound lifts until you get to about RPE 6 or 7. And then after that, you're going to add 5 to 15 pounds each set roughly until the set ends at about RPE 8 or 9. I don't recommend going to absolute failure. I think those are useless for training. I think instead you should be focusing on getting to hard, heavy sets, but still having some gas in the tank left over. Then after that, you're going to perform what's called a back off set, which is where you take the top weight that you used for a set of 1 to 5 usually, and then use 80 to 85%, up to 90% if you're using lower total weights from the top weight. And then you're going to use that for sets of 5 to 10 for 1 to 3 total sets. And what you end up doing by the end of the session is you accumulated a lot of sets, slowly getting heavier in weight with lower reps, and then you used slightly higher moderate reps for 1 to 3 sets to gain some volume in. When you would use this is with large, heavy compound movements in order to drive up raw strength and size. That would be like the main movement of the session. Typically, it's things like squat, bench, deadlift, rows even, potentially, other exercises like that. You could also use it as a secondary exercise to build mass in the reps in the 6 to 10 range. Some people prefer to use back off sets and ramping sets in the 6 to 10 range, and then back off sets with a 10 to 15 rep range. That's acceptable too, although it's not normally how I use it. And typically this would be a strategy that you would use when you're trying to balance muscle gain and also maximum neural drive in unison. So if you want to be able to lift heavy weights, you want to be able to produce the most force possible, and you also need size and muscle to go with it. This is when you would use a format like this. So what does this really do? Why is this beneficial? Well, heavy strength work in the 1 to 5 rep range at about 80% of your 1 rep max or higher. That's typically someone's 8 rep max or higher, anything pretty much over something you couldn't do for about 10 reps. Once you get to loads at that level, it really helps stimulate neural drive and gets the body's structure used to bearing high loads. This is tapping into your nervous system and getting your body able to produce the maximum amount of force that needs to in order to overcome high weights. But the downside of this is typically that you don't gain as much muscle in those rep ranges for the most part. Higher repetition sets place more metabolic stress on the body, and the total volume of work and repetitions completed stimulates greater structural changes, so you gain more mass and connective tissue strength when you use higher rep ranges. By using the back off method after ramping up to a heavy set, you kind of get the best of both worlds, That's why I like using this. I believe in kind of developing all qualities at the same time concurrently with different emphasis on things if possible. So I really love ramping to heavy sets and then using back offs. The reason is, often low rep programs do a good job of driving neural gains in the athlete, but you begin to stall in progress pretty quickly, and you beat the body down more than it builds it because you really lack the number of reps, the volume of work needed to stimulate muscle and connective tissue improvements, which higher rep work typically does. But it doesn't drive the neural gains as powerfully as heavier reps and heavier sets using low repetitions do. So by focusing only on muscular gain, that is a more reliable strategy for strength gain over time. If you just focus on gaining muscle mass, you will get stronger. But by also lifting with higher loads and therefore less total reps as well, then that strength potential is maximized. So this is because as you build muscle mass and connective tissue strength, you have a higher strength potential. More muscle means you'll be stronger. But by also lifting with heavy weights as well, you'll be able to actualize and realize that strength by promoting the body's nervous system faculties to be able to express that strength potential. So we're going to look at neural gains versus muscle gains really quick. Neural gains come quite quickly, at least at first, and much faster than muscular gains. And they also crest sooner because they reach their peak potential more quickly if you don't gain muscle along with it. And muscle gains are a little more consistent. So if you look at these two curves, on the left, you're going to see a period where through 2 blocks of your training, you only train hypothetically neural drive with low repetitions. And let's say you hypothetically gain no muscle. This doesn't mean low reps don't build any muscle. It's not true, but they are not as effective at it. So let's assume you build no muscle, but you still get stronger because you improved the neural drive. And you see in those first 2 blocks, in the first block, your neural drive and strength goes up a lot, and it goes up very little the second block. And that's because you already kind of peaked what you were going to get out of the neural gains, and the neural gains are now cresting and slowing down in their improvement because you didn't add any muscle mass in order to improve your potential neural gains further. Then through your third block, you do add some muscle mass and your neural gains skyrocket along with the training as well because you added more muscle mass to, quote, neurally prime. We'll look at it that way. And then as you didn't gain any muscle mass again for the next 2 blocks, those neural gains started to crest and then stagnate once more. So you look at the second graph to the right and you'll see that the neural gains again they improve very quickly at first and then they begin to fall in terms of improvement, whereas muscular gains are a little bit more consistent. And this means that for maximal strength gains to be optimal, you want to be adding muscular size while also lifting with high loads in order to drive your maximum strength up further. This is what peaks your absolute potential. This is what will get you as strong as possible. You need a base of muscle, and then you want to prime it with heavy loads so your nervous system knows how to use that muscle effectively. So an example of performing a method like this is you would ramp to a set of perhaps in this case 3 reps. I like to use 1 to 5 reps. 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s all work quite well. Singles can work occasionally as well. But ramping to a set of 3 for a squat, this is going to focus on driving the neural improvements for the most part. You're going to gain a little bit of neural and hypertrophy improvements from both of these portions, but again, the first step in ramping to the heavy weight is focusing on the neural drive. So the first thing you do is warm up, 10 sets with the barbell, 5 reps with 135 pounds, 5 reps with 185 pounds. And then finally, let's say hypothetically you get to about 2 plates on each side of the barbell and you rate that and say, well, that felt like about an RPE 6. It was pretty easy, but I started to feel like that was just where I started to actually have to try a little bit hard to lift the weight for 3 reps. And then you add 20 pounds and you're at 245 pounds and you say, all right, that felt about the same, a little harder. I'm going to give that a 6.5 out of 10. You add 30 more pounds, 275 pounds. You say, okay, RPE 7, I'm starting to wake up. Your nervous system's getting, ramped up. You're feeling almost stronger each set, even as you add weight as well. This is very common. We call that the post-activation potentiation phenomenon, but that's a topic for another day. But at 275 pounds, you say that's about an RPE 7. That was a solid effort. It's heavy, but I definitely could bang out a lot more reps. Then you get to 295 pounds. And that's when you say, okay, that felt heavy. The third rep was really difficult, but I did it with good form and control, and I definitely could have performed another couple reps. So that's when you rate about an RPE 8. That's what we were shooting for. So we say, okay, perfect. That was your heavy strength work. You accumulated lots of sets of getting increasingly heavy. You ramp up your nervous system and potentiate it to be able to drive more neural strength out of the muscle that you already have. And you actualize your body's potential for strength. Then, in order to gain muscle and kind of top yourself off, get a little bit of a pump and work a little bit harder in terms of the muscular development, build more connective tissue strength, build more mass, in order to drive that neural strength potential up further in the future, you're going to take 80 to 87% of the weight used at that final set. In this case, it was 295 pounds. And you're going to perform volume work for higher reps with that. In this case, we did 85%. That's about 250 pounds. And that's 85% of 295 pounds. That's about 250, right? So we're going to perform 2 sets with 250 pounds for sets of 8. And that I typically like the back off sets to be around RPE 7 to 8. You can go as low as 6 and potentially as high as 9. But generally speaking, I think RPE 7, maybe 8 is a pretty good rule of thumb. Typically, most sets being RPE 7 to 8, you might notice here, are what I like to go to. Those are high effort sets without crushing you. So you shouldn't feel like you're dying, but you should feel like you're giving a good effort. It shouldn't be crippling, but you also don't want to be too soft. So the goal with using RPE and volume sets like this is you need to be honest and consistent with your RPE ratings. This means that you're you don't necessarily have to be 100% accurate, but you need to be precise. And what that means is, let's say you rated something at an RPE 8, and realistically you could have done, 4 more reps of it, and someone else might say that's more like a 7. Well, as long as to you consistently rate that volume of effort at an RPE 8, then over time, you'll automatically be adding weight to the bar and pushing harder. And if you notice that at the same effort level, the weight is still going up on the bar, then it doesn't matter because you are still getting stronger. So while accuracy matters and you want to try and be honest with yourself, the most important thing is that you're consistent with the RPE ratings. You find out what RPE is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 feels like to you, and you consistently rate those things that way so you can keep track in your logbook and notice trends of getting stronger over time. Using a method like this is classic. It's really effective. It gets tons of people brutally strong. You can use it for basically any compound, typically a barbell, but you can also use it for dumbbell movements as well. You can even use it for weighted calisthenics movements. It's really effective. It's one of my favorite ways to get stronger. It pretty much works for absolutely everybody, including bodybuilders if you want, but most people I work with are strength athletes or field sport athletes, combat sport athletes, and I think this is a great way to add strength and size necessary to develop the athlete over time into the body composition and the force output requirements that they need to perform at a high level. So before we wrap up, let's quickly go over some troubleshooting, common, frequently asked questions, or common mistakes I see. One, this is not a drop set. Many of you that come from the bodybuilding realm or bros that know about bodybuilding methods sometimes think that these are drop sets where you immediately drop from the weight you're using and quickly unload the bar to a lighter weight and then try and bang out these reps ferociously when you're doing the back off sets from the top set. This is a horrible idea. This is exactly what I don't want you to be doing. These aren't drop sets, they're back off sets, which means you're ramping to a heavy weight that you took a full rest between each set to get to, and then you take a full rest between back off sets. I want each rep and set to be a quality set, not necessarily the most ferocious set that got you the most intense cardiovascular pump, whatever. This isn't cardio. I want you to rest fully between each of the hard sets. Once you hit RPE 6 or 7, you should be resting about 3 minutes minimum. The true minimum, I'd say, if the sets are felt pretty easy, is 2 minutes. But at least 3 minutes on average minimum between each of these sets, especially once they get hard. Give yourself the 3-minute rest or longer. Some people take 4 or 5. I've seen longer rests as well. Powerlifters are notorious for taking 10-minute breaks between sets. I don't really think you should be doing that, but 3 to 5 minutes minimum. You want to be executing these well. You're not looking to crush yourself. You're trying to get good stimulation with quality, accumulating quality volume of heavy repetitions and strength work. And then the other thing is rating rate of perceived exertion. The RPE can be tricky for some people if you've never used it before, but that is something you just need to work on, that you will develop over time. And you'll develop two things. One, I mentioned already that it's more important that you're precise, but you'll also develop accuracy over time. So you'll get more precise and more accurate. And the difference between the two is being precise means you're consistent, and accurate means you're correct. So you want to be able to, you might not always be correct. You might rate something at an RPE 8 when really, you could have actually done so many more reps unknowingly that you don't realize it. If your accuracy is way off, that's not good. But what you will discover over time through approaching these sets, seeing what you're capable of, how much weight you can handle over time, weeks go by as you add more weight, you experiment with what you can do, and you're rating these sets and you're documenting the rate of perceived exertion in your logbook, which is extremely important. You can see these trends over time, and if you consistently rate something a certain way, you know what an RPE 8 feels like. You'll eventually be able to adjust that more and more to what an RPE 8 truly feels like, because you're going to be taking sets close to failure sometimes. That might be something I encourage you to do if you can do so safely with an exercise that you've truly mastered, is take some sets closer to failure so you can see what an RPE 8 or 9, perhaps a 10, although I don't encourage it, might actually feel like, and that can give you some perspective on what a 6 or 7 really feels like. And there's also the element where this will be different between exercises. A bench press at RPE 9 could feel easier ultimately than a squat at RPE 7 or 8. I would probably say 8, because the squat is simply just a more stressful, difficult movement to execute. So you need to be taking your RPEs and rating them in the realm of that particular exercise rather than the realm of just how difficult it was on your conditioning or your heart or how the exercise felt. That's kind of the other nuance to using RPE, is a bench press at RPE 8 is just simply not actually as exhausting and difficult as a squat at RPE 8. So you're going to kind of have to develop a relationship with the RPE and the exertion felt and the proximity to failure felt between each exercise. So this takes time. Just start easy, practice, and build it up over time, and that's the advantage of using RPE. RPE gives you flexibility. There are some days where you're going to use less weight at the same RPE because you didn't sleep well, you've been staying up late with a lot of work, you just had a newborn child. Life happens, and this RPE gives you the flexibility to tackle effective training sessions to give you the correct dosage for the day, for you that particular day of the week, given your recovery and circumstances at that moment. This way you don't cripple and crush yourself, beating yourself into the dirt and redlining your engine because you're married to a weight, an intensity, a percentage, and a particular number that you were supposed to do at that time on that particular day. RPE's flexibility allows you to be fluid and continue to make gains without stalling as easily, because you are not banging your head against the wall trying to reach numbers that your biology just isn't letting you. So I know it's a bit of a longer presentation than usual. I'm just getting used to doing this format. I'm experimenting with video format and lecture format. I do enjoy stuff like this, so I'll improve the quality of the video over time. So please forgive me as I'm starting to figure this stuff out. But I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found this useful. Give it a shot. Give ramp up sets and back off sets a place in your training. Experiment with them. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions. You can comment or send me a private message on Twitter, and let me know how this works for you. And we'll be making plenty more videos like this in the future if you like them. So let me know how you like this format, and I'll adjust as well as we continue to make content weekly.